babe.
Ooh! Oh, Derek. Treble soft mints again. I can't do this anymore.
What? Sal, you love soft mints. You love how chewy they are.
If you ever listen to me, you know I like the rugged flavour of Treble extra strong mints, not chewy mints. Derek, I'm leaving.
But I made you a cake.
That's a soft mint with a candle in it.
Come on, I'll sing you Slice. Happy.
Goodbye, Derek.
Choose your Treble.
The race is on. 10 days to go until Britain decides. Follow the battle for number 10 live on LBC.
This is LBC, leading Britain's conversation. Call 0345 6060 973. Tweet at LBC. Text 84850. LBC's Election Call.
Hello, welcome to the programme. It's Ian Dale at Drive, here with you until 8 o'clock. Now, every day during the campaign, we'll be giving you the chance to question a senior politician about what matters most to you. Across the week, we'll hear from all the main parties as Britain decides. On Friday, we heard from Ed Miliband. Today, we're going to hear from Rachel Reeves, Labour's Shadow Work and Pensions Secretary. It's her turn now. Watch us live on lbc.co.uk in glorious HD. Welcome back, Rachel.
Hi, Ian.
Should we get straight into the calls so we can get as many in as
Excellent.
possible? Jim is in Waltham Abbey. Hello, Jim.
Yeah, good evening, yeah.
Hi. What would you like to ask?
Rachel.
Hiya, Jim.
Rachel, I spoke to the researcher before I came on, and one of the things I told her was that I haven't voted for 20 years. The last time I voted was when John Major was in government.
Right.
And I voted for Tony Blair because I was so disenchanted with John Major. This time, I will without a doubt be voting Conservative because of the mess that I believe Labour left the country in when they were last in power. And one of the things, Rachel, that I know that the Labour Party are totally against is 0 hours contracts or flexible hours contracts. And this surely is a way of actually getting people back to work, and yet you want to ban them.
Right, well, first of all, I mean, we had a global financial crisis in 2008, and it affected every country around the world, not just the UK. And I do think it's unfair.
To Rachel, but not every country.
Well, I mean, it started in the United States with the subprime mortgage crisis. It went to Germany, to France, to Japan, to China. It affected countries around the world. And as a result, the debt and the deficit in all of those countries increased. As the economy recovers, we've got to get that deficit down. But let's be clear about who caused this crisis. It was the bankers who got involved in risky activity that they didn't know what they were getting themselves into. And it caused recessions, and it could have caused a depression around the world. Now, I think we made the right decisions back in 2008 to ensure that people could access their money from their bank accounts and all the rest of it. Now, of course, that meant that we were spending more money. But before the financial crisis came along, we in the UK reduced our national debt from 42 to 36% of GDP, which I think is a record to be proud of. And it wasn't spending on schools and hospitals that got us into the mess. It was decisions of these reckless bankers. The question now is, what type of recovery are we going to build? Are we going to have a recovery that works for a privileged few at the top, or are we going to have everybody in our country benefiting?
With 2 million more jobs created in the last 5 years, the Conservatives would argue we have got a recovery that's benefiting everyone.
But what we've also seen, Ian and Jim, in the last 5 years is the number of people who are being paid less than a living wage, up from 3.4 to 4.9 million. So 1.5 million people not being paid the wage that they can afford to live on. And there's now 1.8 million zero-hour contracts in the economy. And, you know, Jim, I don't know what sort of job that you do, but I think that most listeners, and certainly me, myself, I wouldn't be able to live on a zero-hour contract. You know, I've got a mortgage to pay, I've got bills to pay, I've got childcare to pay. And David Cameron has said that he wouldn't be able to live on one of these contracts, and yet the government have done nothing to crack down on them.
But zero-hours contracts come in many shapes and forms. Now, obviously, the exploitative ones, where they ban you from not working for anyone else, even if they don't offer you any work. Obviously, everybody's going to agree that they're a bad thing, and I think the coalition's already done something to to get rid of those. But there are many other people who actually quite like the flexibility that zero-hours contracts afford.
Well, the vast majority of people on them, all the evidence shows that they're not the jobs that people want to do. The majority of people on zero-hour contracts are doing those jobs because they can't find a secure job to do. And we've got more and more people. I met a chap from the West Midlands a few weeks ago who for a year and a half had been on a zero-hour contract, and he talked about how difficult it was for him, and he had a partner and a young child. Really, really tough. You can't say at the end of the month to your landlord, I'm sorry, I didn't get any hours this month, so I can't pay my rent. It doesn't work like that. And yet, if you don't get the hours that week or that month, you can't pay your rent and you can't pay your bills. And so this is about saying if you have a shift cancelled at the last minute, you would get compensated for it. If you work regular hours, you should get a regular contract, and it's about ending those exploitative zero-hour contracts, and that's what we've committed to do.
Jim, you say you haven't voted for 20 years. You say you're going to vote Conservative. Is there anything that Rachel can say that would make you change your mind?
Unfortunately, no.
Okay. Well, we'll leave it there then. Right, let's go to Mark, who's in Dagenham. Hello, Mark.
Hello.
Hi, Mark.
Listen, I'm a small businessman. I've been running a business since 2001. I've had various good and bad times under both governments. But I'll be voting Labour in this election. I think we're going to be the best people to sort out the country as a whole. We've got 5 million people who are working and claiming benefits. That never happened when I left school.
Yeah.
A working man could pay his rent, look after his family out of his wages.
Yeah.
That's not possible now. I work with long-term unemployed people, people who can't get jobs, and I work with people who are working and still claiming benefits.
Yeah.
So the country's actually in a worse state than people realise.
Yeah. Well, I think you're right that 2/3 of working age benefits actually go to people in work, not out of work. And that's because too often work is not paying a wage that people can afford to live on. Rents are going up at a faster rate than wages. And in the last 5 years, there's been something like a 2/3 increase in the number of people in work claiming housing benefit. And so we do need to ensure, Mark, that as the economy recovers, it benefits everybody. I believe that as a country we'll only succeed if ordinary working people succeed, and that means ensuring that recovery benefits everybody. But also for someone like you, Mark, who runs a small business, I think small businesses have had a pretty tough time of it over the last 5 years. We saw a collapse in bank lending over the last few years, but also business rates are crippling many small businesses, as are increasing energy bills. And so our commitment to freeze energy prices and also to cut business rates for small businesses, I hope would help people like you so you can take on and employ more people. You
of course have said that the Labour Party is not the party of people on benefits, which has got you a lot of flack, a lot of criticism from people within the Labour Party. Do you regret saying that now?
Well, Ian, there's a reason why the Labour Party is called the Labour Party. We're the party of work. We're the party for working people, and the Labour Party was formed to give working people a voice. But the Labour Party also created the welfare state to ensure that when people fall on tough times, whether that's because they lose their job, they become disabled, they have a disabled child, when we retire, there's a welfare state that is there to support people. But we're called the Labour Party, not the welfare party. We're there to give working people a voice.
People felt that you demonised people who were on benefits by saying that, by being so blunt about it.
Well, the people who demonise people on benefits are those people who talk about shirkers and scroungers, and that is language that I would never use. As Mark said, a lot of these people who are claiming support from the state, whether that be tax credits or housing benefit, are actually in work, but they're not earning enough to make ends meet. So we need to ensure that the economy works better for ordinary people in the first place. But we've always got to have a social security system that is there for people when they fall on difficult times. And unlike this government, we'll make sure that system is there for people who are disabled and for families.
Rachel Reeves is here for another, 15 minutes or so. 0345 6060 973. And don't forget, you can watch us via the LBC website in HD. Dean is in Bromley. Hello, Dean.
Good evening. I would like to ask, given the fact that in the last Labour administration you admitted to getting it wrong on immigration, how many days after in power will all these people you got wrong on be sent back to their countries of origin, or do we have to live with your mistake forever?
Well, hi, Dean. Look, I believe, and I hope that you would agree with me, that people from other countries have made a huge contribution to our country, both economically and creating jobs. Well, wait a second, because I think it is important that when we talk about immigration, that we talk about the positive contribution that people make in Bromley, in South London, and across the country. Now, Labour Party are not going to be sending anybody back home. This is the home for a lot of people who have made their lives here, who are contributing to our economy, have got children here at school, and who are doing fantastic things for our country. Well, no, it is. You said, when are we going to send them back home? And I'm being very clear to you, Dean. We're not going to be sending people back home. This country is home for a lot of people who weren't necessarily born here.
Let me interpret Dean's question for him a little. I think what underlies what he's saying is, how can we be confident that you won't do the same thing again?
Well, we have made changes on immigration policy. It's one of our 6 pledges for this general election campaign. And we've said, and I'm absolutely committed to this, that people will not be able to claim benefits in this country until they've been here for at least 2 years, because we were talking about the principles of welfare state a moment ago, and I think the welfare state should be based on something for something, that you pay into the system, you draw down on it when you need.
What
a 2-year wait before migrants can claim benefits.
What does it say on your mug? Controlled immigration? Is that the phrase?
Yes. Yeah,
how can you control immigration when we're still members of the European Union?
Well, one way we can control it is by controlling what support people would get when they come to this country. So if you come to this country to access our benefit system, well, we'll put an end to that by saying that you have to be here for at least 2 years before you can claim those benefits. No child benefit will be sent overseas with a Labour government. So, we've committed to big changes because we have learnt some of those lessons of the past. And if any other country enters the European Union, we won't have the same rules about people being able to come over here.
Marginal seat alert coming up. Hastings is where we find Troy. What would you like to ask, Troy?
Hello. I was wondering, how to put the question, I'm not too sure, but about rents, how difficult it is for people to break from rent and try and get a mortgage. I wonder how much more you can help them apart from reducing stamp duty.
OK.
Yeah. Well, first of all, Troy, we've got to help people who are renting, because too often people who are renting are being ripped off, and that makes it harder, as you know, to save, to get that deposit together for your first home. So that's why we've said that we would have secure 3-year tenancies where you can rest assured that your rent is not going to go up by more than inflation for 3 years.
What if I don't want a 3-year tenancy?
Well, if you don't want a 3-year tenancy, you don't have to have one, but you would have that right to a 3-year tenancy that you don't have today. And in other countries, you have longer-term tenancies. And the reason this is important is that we've now got 11 million people renting in this country. 1.5 million families with children are renting. And you've got this situation where you can be kicked out with a month or 2 months' notice, despite the fact you've got your kids at a local school. And it's incredibly difficult for people to plan for the future and to put down roots as a family if you have no security. So this is about giving greater security to people in the private rented sector. But Troy also asked about how we can help people get on the housing ladder. And of course, we announced today that there'll be no stamp duty for first-time buyers on properties up to £300,000.
Which will mean that house prices will increase, won't it? That's the natural
at the same
market
time,
working then.
So that is helping people on the demand side, but we've also committed, as you know, to build an additional 200,000 homes a year. At the moment, last year, 118,000 homes were built in the UK. We're saying 200,000 additional homes a year to help more first-time...
In addition to the 118,000 or in total?
In total to 200,000, so almost double what you're building today. So that will ensure that more people can get on the housing ladder because we're having more homes built.
And how many of those will be social housing?
We haven't given a number, but we want to make it easier for councils, local authorities, for housing associations to build new homes. And we've also said today that up to half of new homes built will be reserved for local first-time buyers. Again, helping people make that step from renting or living at home with mum and dad to be able to get a home of your own. So making it a little bit cheaper by the stamp duty changes, but also ensuring that instead of, and as we see in lots of parts of London in particular, housing is being flogged off to foreign investors, actually giving a chance to local people to get those homes.
But you're not going to ban that?
No, but we're going to say that up to half of the properties can be reserved for local first-time buyers. That's a massive change. Of course, at the moment, you can't put any type of restrictions like that in.
OK, let's go to Marion, who's in Manchester. Hello, Marion.
Oh, hello. Hello, Rachel.
Hi, Marion.
Hello. Just a question for you. In a dilemma, and I don't know who to vote for. We've been sadly let down by the coalition in relation to the accelerated rise in the state pension age.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just interested to see what Labour intend to do about putting this wrong right.
OK. Well, Marion, when I was Shadow Pensions Minister, I opposed...
You still are, aren't you?
I'm now work and pensions.
Right.
My first job that I had in the Shadow team was Shadow Pensions Minister back in...
Which is where Margaret Thatcher started, of course.
Oh, right, OK. Oh, I didn't know that. Thanks for that fact. So when I was Shadow Pensions Minister, that's when these changes went through. And I led a big campaign with Age UK, with women who were born in 1953, 1954, who were particularly affected by these changes. The government wanted to increase the state pension age for women by 2 years, with just 6 years' notice. We said that was wrong and unfair. Now, in the end, we got some climb down from the government, and they made it a maximum of 18 months increase. And I wasn't happy with that. I wanted to see that whole thing not go ahead. But we did get some concessions because of the campaign we ran. But the reality is, Marion, if you have 5 years of a government, they can put in place changes, and we're not going to be able to turn back a lot of the bad things the government have done. We're not going to be able to, undo the bedroom tax. People who have paid the bedroom tax, when they're not going to get their money back. We'll cancel the bedroom tax. We will get rid of it, but you can't undo the bad things that have happened over the last 5 years, and we're not going to be able to reverse the changes to the state pension age. But we have also been clear that in future anybody would get 10 years notice on changes to the state pension age. So I know that you're not going to be totally happy with what I've said, but we did get that concession.
Okay.
That's 6 months less than it would have otherwise been. You wouldn't have got without Labour opposition.
Marion, thank you for that. Gary has emailed in a question. He says, could you ask Rachel, where does she stand on the Greville Janner case? She's my local MP, and this will determine how I vote. So no pressure then.
Right.
It doesn't give a clue either.
I think it is incredibly difficult, this one, because if someone is suffering from dementia and doesn't remember what happened in the past and isn't the person they used to be. I mean, my grandparents had dementia, and if you asked them to account for their actions in the past, they were like children. They didn't really know who anybody was, let alone be able to give evidence in a court of law. And so I don't see how somebody, if the director of public prosecution says that he can't stand trial because he won't be able to give any meaningful evidence, I don't really see how you can go ahead with a trial. But I guess it does show that we need justice sooner for people, and we need to make sure that none of these sorts of things are not able to happen again.
I think the point is she had the option of letting a judge decide the future, and bearing in mind the CPS history with their failure to prosecute him, it might have been better if she had actually let a judge or a jury look at this and decide whether he should face trial.
Well, I guess, if he's not able to give evidence, and if he's not able to, to make any sense of the past, then you can't have a meanful trial, can you?
No, but the question is the judge and the jury would then make that decision as to whether he was fit to stand trial. But well, let's move on. Let's go to Will, who's in Vauxhall. Hello, Will.
Hi, Rachel.
Hi, Will.
Hi. Rachel, I was just wondering if you could help. I've been looking at some of the polls, and I'm slightly alarmed by the kind of meteoric rise of the SNP in Scotland. I was just wondering if you could tell me whether it means that, is Labour finished forever in Scotland?
There was a poll out today, 54% for the SNP, up 2. That means they would take 57 of the 59 constituencies, which, I mean, bearing in mind the Tories have only ever had 1 or 2 MPs, I think, since about 1987 or something. That would be a bitter blow, wouldn't it?
Well, let's see what happens on election day. We've still got 10 days to go. There are still a lot of undecided people. Well, there's still a lot of undecided people. And I do think as election day gets closer, it becomes clearer and clearer the choices between a Conservative government and a Labour government. And if you want to get rid of the Tories, you've got to vote Labour. That's the only guarantee of kicking the Tories out in Scotland, in Yorkshire, in London, and around the country. And I think as election day gets closer, that choice becomes clearer to people. And so I would hope, and we'll just have to see what happens on election day, that we call some of that back.
Since the referendum, which the Better Together campaign won, which was more or less run by Labour, how come it's all gone so wrong since then? You must sort of scratch your head about this and think, well, how can we have got it so wrong over the last 6 months?
Well, I mean, I'm not in Scotland, and I don't know exactly, what has gone on. But I do know that people in Scotland, like people around the country, do not want another 5 years of Conservative government. And the job of the Labour Party in Scotland in the next 10 days and around the country is to convince people that the only way to get rid of the Tories is to vote Labour. That's the only way of guaranteeing it. You can't guarantee that we're going to get rid of the Tories by voting Lib Dem, Green or SNP. The only way to guarantee it is voting Labour.
Alice is in Canterbury. Hi, Alice.
Hi there.
Hi, Alice.
I just want to ask Rachel, because I saw that she studied economics at LSE and then worked for the Bank of England. But recently there's been a bit of backlash from a number of economists saying that the housing policy is impractical. What would you say back to them?
Well, on the rents policy that we announced yesterday about having a cap for 3 years on how much rents can go up by, you've got that in other countries. Germany, Spain, Ireland have all got caps on how much rents can increase by. So if it works in other countries, I don't see why it can't work in the UK. And this is all about giving greater security to those 11 million people who are renting. More and more young people are staying at home for longer because they can't afford to get on the housing ladder, but they can't even afford to get the deposit together or pay rents. Rents on average have gone up by £1,200 in the last 5 years. We've got to stem that increase. Some parts of London have had double-digit increases in rents in just the last year.
If this policy is so important, and if the stamp duty policy was so important, why weren't they in your manifesto? Why have you suddenly announced them now? Aren't you making policy on the hoof just for a cheap, short-term political headline?
Well, this is a general election campaign, and obviously you're going to save some of your best policies and some of your announcements for the short campaign when they're going to have maximum impact and people are going to hear them. But look, we've been talking about housing for the last few years, whether it's our commitment to build 200,000 homes
Emma Reynolds, your housing
year.
spokeswoman, she only 4 weeks ago, she was on record saying we will not introduce rent controls, and yet here we are 4 weeks later, she's been made to look a complete idiot.
I don't think that that's the case at all.
Well, why would she say we're not going to do it, and then 4 weeks later you do?
These aren't the traditional rent controls. These are still
like
saying...
these
are still saying at the beginning of a tenancy, it's up to the market to determine what the rent is. But then when you enter into that commitment, a 3-year commitment, there'll be a cap on how much the rents can go up by. But at the beginning of a tenancy, there would not be a rent control.
But it's economically illiterate, because at the end of 3 years... what's going to happen? You start on a rent of £1,000 a month, then in 3 years' time, suddenly it jumps to maybe £1,300. So actually, you're no better off.
Well, first of all, remember, we're also going to be building those additional homes to take some of the pressure off the housing markets. That's an important component about this as well, because we need to increase the supply. But people, when they enter a tenancy, need to know that they've got some security. I gave the example earlier, but it is a really important one. If you've got kids at the local primary school, and after a year, your landlord says, look, you're welcome to stay where you are, Ian, but, it's going to be an extra £200 a month, then what do? You've got your kids at the local school. If you can't find anything else local, you're either going to have to travel halfway across town to get your kids to the school they're at, or move them to school. It's incredibly difficult for people, and we've now got 1.5 million families with children renting. And so, far from economically illiterate, I think these policies are economically sensible, because it will help families prepare and plan for the future.
Right, we've got a very short time left. I want to squeeze 2 quick questions. I want the questions to be brief, and if you would as well, Rachel, I'd be grateful.
Sure,
Gareth is in Kensington. Hi, Gareth.
Hi there. I've been a social housing tenant for 10 years or so, just about to buy my first home. I've got 4 children. I've always worked. and we were overcrowded and found it very difficult. There's a huge waiting list to try and get a larger property. And so there's a concept of mutual exchange, where you can swap with another person who's, perhaps they don't need as many bedrooms.
Yeah.
We went through that process. It's very difficult. Found lots of people under-occupying homes, and they could just cherry pick, and they seem to be not particularly motivated at all, and a lot of them didn't seem to have any particular ties to the area and so on. So I'm very much in favour of the bedroom tax. I think it's been brilliant, really. It's such a help to people in the.
Gareth, I did ask for a short question, and you've completely gone against that. Get to the point, would you?
The phrase it short. Why would you not be in favour of it? Is the question.
Well, the evidence from the government shows that just 5% of people affected by the bedroom tax moved, and there's a simple reason for that. 2/3 of people affected by the bedroom tax are disabled, and many of those spare bedrooms, as the government calls them, are not spare bedrooms at all. They're bedrooms where carers come and stay to offer respite. They're bedrooms where equipment, for example, dialysis equipment is stored. I went to visit a family in West Wales, grandparents who cared full-time for their grandson. They had a third bedroom where carers came to stay to relieve those grandparents and also to store equipment. The room was packed full. That bedroom tax is costing people, on average, £14 a week, £14 that they don't have. Now, the way to deal with your situation, Gareth, is to build more homes, which Labour has committed to do, not to penalise some of the most vulnerable people in society.
Gareth, thank you very much indeed. Apologies, we haven't got any more time to go to other calls. Rachel Reeves, thank you very much indeed.
Pleasure.
Now, coming up later this week on LBC's Election Call, we'll have prominent politicians from across all the main parties. And don't forget, if you miss anything, you can get all of this and more from LBC's podcast service. Full details at lbc.co.uk. I'm Ian Dale at Drive, LBC News Time. It's 6:31. News headlines with Dominic Byrne.
Britain sending a team of Gurkha engineers to Nepal after the earthquake on Saturday, which killed